Good morning, Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. Today, being Tuesday, I'm in the sanctuary and I'm in the children's area. Remember this with all the little toys and things? I'm sitting on a very small chair here. I hope it doesn't break under me. We got books and stuff here. We got all those things, and the last time they got played with was last week on Tuesday when my 4.5-year-old grandson was with me. And while I was in here doing my message, he was back here playing, but then he came up front, and you probably heard his voice on my Tuesday message last week. He was with me the Sunday before that in our home, sitting next to Sue, and was there with us. That was fun. I hope you enjoyed hearing the sounds of children during church. I kind of missed that. And it's something that has diminished as churches age, having kids in church. The messy, noisy interruption that happens that Pastor John's kids, his girls, brought to our worship is a sound that is music to my ears. Today's story is about children. And what a blessing children are. We're in 16th chapter of Genesis. Abram has no heirs except for someone who is as he says, a slave in my house. Verse 1, now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had an Egyptian slave girl whose name was Hagar. Probably when they were down in Egypt. They went down there for the famine and came back then with a servant or a slave. Interesting, isn't it? The Israelites are going to go through a period where they become slaves. And part of the Passover ceremony, which recalls that whole thing, includes language that says, may we work for justice so that never will anyone be a slave. But this is long before that, when owning slaves was something you just did if you're a wealthy person. So we don't want to think of Abram as this poor itinerant one camel and a poor wife. We learned from the previous chapters that he was able to put together an army of 300 armed men just from those who were within his encampment. So he really is a king in his own right, in his own domain, or at least a lord of his territory. He is by no means poor. He would be among the wealthiest of the people in the land at that time. His wife then had a servant, Hagar. And because Sarai herself would have blamed herself for not having a child, it's never blamed on the male. It was always the female who was barren. And it was often seen as a judgment from God. God hates me. I didn't give Abram a child. So she says to her servant girl, go into Abram and give him a child. Verse 4, he went into Hagar, she conceived, and when she saw that she conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. So now the slave girl has something over Sarai. I was able to give your husband a child and you were not. Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my slave girl to you to embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. So it was Sarai's idea to send Hagar in, but when Hagar conceived and started acting a little bit pretentious about it, a little bit arrogant, then Sarai blames Abram. This is on you. You're the one. Well, wait a minute. This is kind of back in the Adam and Eve story where God says, Adam, where are you? Well, I was hiding from you. I didn't want you to know that I was naked. And, oh, really? Well, who told you? Did you eat of the fruit? Well, the woman, yeah, she gave it to me. You created her. It's your fault, God. It's this blame game. Again, sin, judgment, grace. This is the sin then. Okay, I can't have a child. I'll give you my maid. And now it's your fault that my maid hates me because you're going to get the child. But Abram says, wait a minute, she's your maid, not mine. You're a slave girl. Do whatever you want. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, verse 6, and she ran away from her. So, I don't know, had her whipped or whatever, and then Hagar flees. Verse 7, the angel of the Lord found Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will greatly multiply your offspring so that they cannot be counted for multitude. Okay. So Sarai is going to get her slave girl back, her maid back. Abram is going to get a son. There's an interesting detail. Verse 13. She named the Lord who spoke to her, you are El Roi, the God who hears. For she said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? Again, here's this word El. Elohim, El Shaddai, El, the most brief name for God. Whenever you see that El, we'll get into that later on. Beth El, house of God. El-Ishah, which we call Elisha. El-Iyah, or Elijah, my God is Yahweh. So when you hear the El, that says, oh, God, El Roi, God who hears. Verse 15, Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. So Ishmael is now the heir in Abram's house. And he's 86. And 13 years go by. Ishmael is now of age, and we're in chapter 17. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and will make you exceedingly numerous. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, as for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the ancestor of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful. And of course, Abram is thinking, well, I know, I've got Ishmael. So, but then in verse 9, or verse 11, it's the mark of circumcision. Every male among you shall be circumcised. Circumcise the flesh of your foreskin shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you throughout your generations. Every male among you must be circumcised when he's 8 days old, including the slave born in your house, the one bought with your money from any foreigner. Both the slave born in your house and the one bought with your money must be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. But now this comes after Ishmael is 13 years old, so it's not going to apply to Ishmael. Did Abraham understand? Oh, but that means the covenant with God. And Abraham does not then extend to Ishmael. God will make a different covenant with Ishmael. And God then confirms this in verse 15. God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? So now we know she's 10 years younger. And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live in your sight. Abram has a son. He's 13 years old. Why can't Ishmael? I love Ishmael. He's my son. He's my firstborn. Verse 19, God said, no. Your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac, which means I laughed. Because both Abraham and Sarah laughed at God, saying, you can give us a child in our old age. Okay. Verse 23, Abraham took his son Ishmael and all the slaves born in his house and bought with his money every male among the men of Abraham's house and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day. Abraham, 99 years old, he was circumcised that day. Ishmael was 13 years old. So Abraham wants to make sure that just in case this thing with Sarah and this possible son doesn't work out, that Abraham has an heir. Now is Ishmael acceptable in your sight, O God? Well, what's going to happen to Ishmael and those who descend from him, Ishmaelites? Stay tuned.